You are not what they see in the mirror. You are the mirror itself. You wake up, and the first thing you see is your reflection. Smooth skin, perfectly aligned features, a smile that seems to capture light in its own orbit. People notice, they comment, they envy, but no one asks what it costs you to wake up behind that mask. The mirror becomes a prison because every glance reminds you that your value is measured by how others perceive your surface. You begin to crave that reflection's approval, yet it never fully satisfies. You are trapped between the admiration you receive and the emptiness it hides. Modern life amplifies this. Selfies, filtered perfection, likes, hearts, virtual applause. Every notification is a reminder that your worth is performance. The very thing that draws attention isolates you, creating a cage made of light and shadow. You are applauded and alone. People assume your life is effortless, but beneath the polished surface lies tension, a quiet ache that no compliment can soothe. Being attractive is a burden disguised as privilege. Society whispers, "You are lucky," but it is a lie that cuts deeper than any blade. Envy surrounds you like a storm. People approach with hidden agendas, desire, resentment, competition. They rarely see you, only what you reflect back to them. Friendships become transactional, conversations rehearsed. Trust is rare because people assume your charm is always the currency, never the true self. Romantic attention follows the same pattern. Flattery becomes a chain. You are wanted, yet profoundly misunderstood. Even subtle betrayals sting more because your perception of beauty sets expectations you cannot meet internally. Your attractiveness does not shield you from pain, it amplifies it. The more the world sees, the less they seek to understand. Every smile you give carries the weight of judgment, every compliment a shadow of suspicion. And here is the shadow lurking behind the light, the unseen fracture in your identity. You start to notice patterns, loneliness after admiration, disconnection after desire, early wounds, unresolved and silent, whisper through your veins. Trauma hides behind the gaze of others, shaping your choices without consent. Emotional isolation becomes habitual. You are drawn into the cycle of needing to perform, needing to be admired, needing to be wanted, while the real self shrinks in silence. There is a journey ahead, and it begins with this recognition. Beauty is not a shield. It is a mirror that reflects not just the light, but also the cracks beneath. The path to freedom begins by facing the truth that has been hidden in plain sight, by seeing the shadow behind every glance and every smile. Beauty is a mirror, not a prison. People do not see you. They see what they want you to be. You walk into a room, and eyes follow. Compliments land like sparks, bright, fleeting, intoxicating. Every "you look amazing" wraps around you like a warm cloak, but the warmth is shallow, almost hollow. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Here, the irritation is subtle. You sense the attention is not entirely sincere. Some eyes carry envy, others carry desire. Rarely is there care. You begin to crave it, to chase it, believing that each affirmation validates your worth. Social media amplifies this. Hearts, comments, followers, all a digital chorus that applauds your image while ignoring your inner life. The mask of approval is seductive, and you wear it effortlessly, but it is a mask nonetheless. It teaches you to perform, to anticipate reactions, to mold yourself into what pleases the world. You start measuring value by applause. The problem is that applause is a mirror, reflecting only your surface, never your essence. The intoxication is real. The emptiness beneath it is real. You feel connected, yet isolation stretches beneath the glitter like a shadow. Then comes the mirage of romance. Partners are drawn to the surface, the allure of beauty, the effortless magnetism that demands attention. At first it feels thrilling, intoxicating, a storybook connection, but soon the pattern emerges. The depth you crave is missing. Conversations circle around appearance, status, or social performance. Affection comes conditional, as long as you remain captivating, desirable, polished. Real emotional intimacy feels like an intrusion they cannot manage, a vulnerability they are unprepared to hold. Modern dating apps make it worse. Swipes, likes, endless options, yet none stay to see the self beneath the surface. You realize the affection is transactional, sometimes even manipulative, designed to satisfy their desire for beauty, not your desire for connection. Every kiss, every compliment becomes a currency of exchange rather than an expression of true care. And the heart, hungry for genuine touch, begins to ache in silence. False security spreads its web. Friends, colleagues, admirers, they all offer validation that feels real. Invitations, praise, attention. It creates the illusion of belonging. You think for a moment that you are seen, understood, valued. But beneath the surface, the emptiness lingers. No one is there for the cracks, the moments of doubt, the vulnerability that is too human to broadcast. Social admiration is like a hall of mirrors. It multiplies your image, but it never touches your soul. You are surrounded by people, yet profoundly alone. Recognition cannot substitute intimacy. Attention cannot heal wounds. Every interaction reinforces the performance. Every compliment reminds you that the world values the reflection more than the reality. You start to understand that comfort built on admiration is fragile, deceptive, a mirage shimmering over a desert of emotional isolation. True belonging is not in applause, it is in existence. It is in authenticity. And until you face that, every embrace, every smile, every word of praise will feel both sweet and bitter, like fire on the skin with cold beneath the flame. You are worthy beyond their gaze. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. You carry wounds you never chose, yet they choose you. Childhood whispers in your bones, neglect, criticism, the silent disapproval that lingers long after voices have faded. Every decision you make, every path you walk, is subtly guided by these invisible scars. You may appear confident, magnetic, untouchable, yet inside, the shadow moves like a puppeteer behind the scenes. You think your charm or beauty can protect you. That admiration might shield you from pain, but it cannot. The unconscious drives you. You seek approval, affection, or avoidance, often contradicting your conscious desires. Perhaps you enter a career that promises prestige rather than fulfillment, or you settle for relationships that mirror past patterns rather than nurture your growth. Carl Jung observed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Your shadow shapes your choices silently, invisibly, in ways you cannot always predict. Your attractiveness does not dilute this influence, it amplifies it. Beauty draws attention, yes, but it also attracts projection. People project their envy, desires, and insecurities onto you. The attention can be intoxicating, yet it often reflects their shadows, not your reality. Every glance, every compliment carries weight beyond acknowledgement. It triggers old fears, unresolved anger, hidden insecurities. Modern life intensifies this. Social media highlights comparisons, and public perception often distorts true self-awareness. When someone envies your success, your looks, your charm, it can reignite childhood fears of inadequacy or rejection. You may begin to act defensively, manipulate interactions, or retreat into silence, all unconscious strategies designed to protect wounds that have never healed. Attractiveness becomes a magnifier. It does not erase pain, it heightens the stakes, exposing the fragile architecture of your inner world. The shadow exerts authority over your life in ways you rarely admit. Perhaps you find yourself drawn to toxic relationships, repeating patterns despite conscious awareness. You might sabotage opportunities, fail to speak up for yourself, or feel inexplicable anxiety when praised. Trauma does not need conscious permission to steer your emotions. It orchestrates decisions, choosing partners, friends, even careers that echo past wounds. For example, someone who craves validation from absent parents may unconsciously attract people who withhold affection, perpetuating a cycle of rejection. You might excel outwardly while inwardly feeling disconnected, hollow, or unworthy. The more you attempt to control outcomes with logic or charm, the more the shadow reminds you that your inner programming is older than your conscious will. Awareness is the first step. Recognizing that attraction, success, or admiration cannot substitute for inner integration. Facing this truth requires courage, introspection, and willingness to meet the parts of yourself you have long ignored. You begin to see the pattern. Your shadow is not punishment. It is a guide, a hidden map of what you have not yet embraced. Each reaction, each emotional trigger, each attraction and repulsion is a message from the unconscious, directing you to what remains unhealed. The journey is not about denying your beauty, charm, or achievements. It is about aligning them with self-awareness, understanding that your worth is not merely in the gaze of others, but in the depth of your own recognition. Modern life tempts you to measure success in likes, appearances, and attention, but these are shadows of shadows, reflections that cannot satisfy the soul. True empowerment begins when you acknowledge that your wounds are not weaknesses to hide, but keys to understanding, patterns to study, truths to integrate. You realize that unconscious influence is not destiny. It is a signal. The shadow calls for recognition, confrontation, and integration. You can no longer mistake surface admiration for guidance, nor let past neglect dictate your choices. The more consciously you embrace your wounds, the less power they hold over unconscious decisions. Beauty becomes not a mask, but a tool. Magnetism becomes a mirror for self-understanding. Life shifts from reactive repetition to intentional creation. You begin to choose partners who reflect respect, careers that honor purpose, actions that align with true values. Each day becomes a dialogue between your conscious will and the shadow's wisdom, a careful navigation of light and dark within yourself. The shadow guides, but you command. You cannot pour from an empty cup, no matter how perfect the vessel appears. The applause fades. The smiles around you feel distant, almost performative. You hear compliments, see admiration, but inside there is a hollow echo. That laughter that once felt warm now rings like a distant bell. Hollow and sharp, Carl Jung said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." You begin to notice the cracks in your mask, those moments when admiration no longer shields you. A casual remark, a pause, a glance that doesn't linger. Suddenly your confidence wavers. The praise that once fueled you feels insufficient, even meaningless. You realize that the reflection others see is not who you are, and the discrepancy is unbearable. Social media amplifies this fracture. Likes and comments provide instant validation, yet they vanish as quickly as they appear. You crave more, but it never fills the void. The mask of perfection, once your armor, now weighs on you. You feel exposed, anxious and profoundly lonely, as if everyone sees the surface while the true self drifts in shadow, unseen and unheard. You are not just wearing a mask, you are living multiple lives. Outwardly, you smile, attract, perform, and captivate. Inside, anxiety, self-doubt, and unmet needs stir relentlessly. You compare yourself to the image you project, and the inner self seems diminished, fragmented. Relationships echo this duality. People adore the charm, the beauty, the perfection, but rarely the vulnerability, the complexity, the unseen struggles. Every interaction becomes a delicate negotiation between the self you present and the self you hide. Even achievements feel hollow because they are measured against external approval, not authentic fulfillment. You realize that the more you try to control the narrative of perception, the more the inner self fragments. Modern life magnifies this. Filters, curated posts, and the constant gaze of others reinforce the gap between your lived reality and the projected image. You are caught in a storm of your own making, trying to satisfy eyes that cannot truly see. The division between self and image becomes painful, visceral, impossible to ignore. And then comes the collapse, the slow, grinding weight of illusion falling away. Superficial interactions lose their charm. The applause feels empty. Flattery begins to sting rather than soothe. You notice patterns in every relationship, moments where admiration substitutes for understanding, where charm is mistaken for depth. You question choices you once thought unshakable. Romantic connections, friendships, career decisions, all are scrutinized through the lens of authenticity versus performance. The walls you built to protect yourself, to present perfection, now feel like prisons. Sleep becomes restless. Solitude feels heavy. You face despair, confusion, and a gnawing sense of misalignment between the life you lead and the person you truly are. Yet in this collapse, there is revelation. The illusions cannot survive scrutiny. The fractured identity calls for attention, for integration. The dissonance that feels unbearable is also a doorway. A chance to confront what you have hidden, to reconcile the outward image with the inward truth. Every fragment of the self, every shadow, every suppressed fear begins to speak. This breakdown is not defeat, it is the prelude to clarity. You learn that true strength is not in the perfection others admire, but in the courage to face what they cannot see. The cracks reveal the path forward, the hidden map of who you are beneath the performance. You begin to understand that the weight of admiration and external validation is meaningless unless paired with self-recognition and authenticity. In this moment, despair transforms into insight. The collapse of illusion is not the end. It is the beginning of integration. You recognize the need to confront your shadows, to reconcile the fragmented self, and to allow authenticity to guide your choices. This is where real power begins, not in applause, not in charm, but in understanding, embracing, and unifying the fractured self into wholeness. My true self rises from the cracks. Love is not a reflection of your appearance. It is a recognition of your soul. You have been chasing what you thought was love. Compliments, attention, desire, they all felt like warmth, like connection. But Carl Jung reminds us, nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment, and especially on their children, than the unlived life of the parent. The unlived life manifests in subtle ways. You were seeking validation for who you appeared to be rather than who you were. Every pursuit, every admiration you received was often surface level, motivated by your attractiveness, charm, or social presence. People wanted what you reflected, not what you contained. Romantic gestures, flattery, social recognition, they felt intoxicating, but beneath them was a subtle emptiness. Modern life amplifies this illusion. Likes, messages, superficial praise, all ephemeral shadows masquerading as affection. Recognizing this truth is the first step. Much of what you believed was love was never love at all. It was attachment to an image, a projection, a desire that had nothing to do with the depth of your being. Once you see this, the chains of illusion begin to loosen. Understanding this distinction is liberating. Once you realize that admiration and pursuit often respond to your surface rather than your essence, you reclaim your clarity. Patterns in relationships that once seemed inevitable now reveal themselves. You were drawn to people who echoed your performance, not your truth. Toxic cycles of dependence, envy, or conditional affection can be identified and broken. Liberation begins not with anger, but with awareness, a clear-eyed recognition of what was and what was not real. Social media, past romances, friendships built on convenience, all begin to lose their hold over your emotional equilibrium. You no longer need to prove your worth through others' desire for your appearance. Every decision now carries intention rather than reaction. You begin to separate presence from projection, connection from performance. You see that the liberation is not in rejecting relationships, but in discerning which connections honor your authentic self. The foundation for healing lies in integration. Your shadow, the hidden and often rejected parts of yourself, is the doorway to genuine connection. When you embrace your wounds, your fears, your unacknowledged desires, you become whole and your relationships shift naturally. People begin to respond to the real you, the person behind the mask, beyond the reflection. Shadow work allows you to recognize triggers, patterns, and projections in others, giving you the ability to engage with depth and authenticity. Modern examples abound. Someone who once sought validation through appearance now cultivates friendships and romance that honor vulnerability. Someone who felt dependent on flattery now sets boundaries that protect emotional integrity. The process is gradual, reflective, and sometimes uncomfortable, but each step rebuilds self-worth on a foundation that is independent of external admiration. You realize that true love, genuine connection, and authentic self-expression emerge only when the mask dissolves and the shadow is embraced. You start to see the pattern in every interaction. What once seemed loving was often a reflection, an echo, or a mirage. Attention no longer controls your emotions. Validation no longer dictates your choices. You feel a profound sense of relief as the illusion lifts. The past cannot define you, admiration cannot imprison you, and surface affection cannot diminish your intrinsic value. Shadow integration equips you with discernment, patience, and the ability to cultivate relationships that honor depth rather than image. You recognize that healing is not about avoiding the world, but about engaging with it consciously, with awareness and courage. Each interaction, each decision becomes a mirror, reflecting your growth rather than your fear. You begin to trust your instincts, honor your boundaries, and seek connection that resonates with the fullness of your being. True love sees the soul, not the reflection. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You have carried shadows behind your reflection for as long as you can remember. Hidden fears, unspoken jealousy, unacknowledged resentment, they stir quietly beneath the charm and beauty that others admire. Carl Jung reminds us that knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. Begin by facing it. Sit in stillness, alone with your reflection, and name the emotions that have shaped your choices. Acknowledge the resentment toward those who envy you, the insecurity that surfaces when admiration feels conditional, the fear of being exposed beneath the image you present. Visualize these feelings as a storm within you, lightning flashing, wind howling but contained. Observe them without judgment. Write them down, speak them aloud, allow them to exist. Modern life often masks these emotions with distractions, scrolling feeds, curated interactions, constant validation. But true confrontation requires stillness. The shadows you have avoided are not enemies, they are messengers. The more you resist, the more power they hold over your actions, decisions, and relationships. By naming them, feeling them, and observing them, you reclaim the first layer of power, awareness. The shadow is not punishment, it is a teacher. Every suppressed desire, every fear, every wound carries insight. Patterns emerge when you listen. The repeated attraction to unavailable partners, the compulsive need for approval, the anxiety behind admiration. Beauty amplifies these patterns, highlighting vulnerabilities that have long been ignored. But rather than fear this reflection, let it guide you. Your envy reveals what you secretly value. Your fear shows what you need to protect. Your resentment marks boundaries that have been crossed. Integrating these lessons illuminates authentic desires that are often buried beneath societal expectation or performance. You realize that each shadowed aspect is a door. Behind it lies a part of yourself you have denied, a truth you have ignored. In recognizing this, you gain clarity about what you truly want, who you want to be, and how to engage with the world without sacrificing integrity. Modern examples abound. Someone who once sought approval in relationships now identifies partners aligned with their deepest needs. Someone who feared judgment now uses their presence to inspire rather than perform. The shadow teaches you that self-understanding precedes influence, and then comes transformation. The very beauty that once seemed like a source of anxiety, dependency, or superficial admiration becomes a tool. When aligned with conscious awareness, it is not a mask, but a channel for influence, expression, and connection. Your presence commands attention, not to satisfy fear, but to communicate authenticity. Each interaction becomes deliberate rather than reactive. You learn to harness your charm to express empathy, to inspire others, and to set boundaries without apology. Pain becomes power when it is acknowledged and redirected. The moments that once isolated you now fuel insight. The envy that once stung now reveals what you cherish. The fear that once held you back now propels action. Beauty is no longer a currency demanded by others. It becomes a mirror reflecting the strength, depth, and integrity you have cultivated within. Modern life offers countless opportunities to practice this. Presentations, creative work, social influence, romantic relationships. Every arena becomes a field for conscious expression. The shadows you feared are now allies, guiding choices, revealing truth, and amplifying your presence with purpose rather than vanity. You begin to understand that empowerment is not about controlling others or dominating attention. It is about owning your inner world, acknowledging every fear, every wound, every suppressed desire, and allowing them to inform your actions without dictating them. Beauty becomes a tool, but the true power comes from self-mastery, the ability to navigate life with awareness of shadow and light alike. You feel a quiet strength in the knowledge that no external admiration, envy, or validation can destabilize you because you have integrated the very forces that once shook you. This is not instantaneous. It is a process of daily recognition, reflection, and conscious choice. Each confrontation with fear, each acknowledgement of jealousy, each act of integration deepens your authority over yourself. You transform the burden of attractiveness into an instrument of intentional influence, compassion, and authentic presence. Your shadow, once a source of anxiety and isolation, now fuels creativity, wisdom, and connection. You meet your shadow, and in its depth, you find your power. Peace is not found in the gaze of others, but in the silence of your own soul. You have spent years measuring yourself against eyes that do not see the whole you. Compliments, admiration, fleeting attention, they once felt like oxygen, like proof that you mattered. Carl Jung reminds us, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." Choosing peace, means releasing the invisible chains of external approval. You no longer need to perform, to shine, or to please simply to be acknowledged. Freedom begins in the quiet, in the decision to honor your own worth independent of others' desire or envy. Social media, public recognition, romantic validation, these are shadows, illusions that cannot define your value. When you relinquish their hold, a subtle light fills the gaps left by dependence on surface admiration. You notice how lighter your steps feel, how calmer your heart becomes when applause is no longer the compass for your decisions. The liberation is gentle but profound. You are no longer a reflection of others' expectations, but a sovereign presence in your own life. Reclaiming the self begins where shadow integration ends. Every fear you once hid, every insecurity that drove your relationships, every longing for admiration, they now serve as guides rather than chains. The duality between outer appearance and inner truth dissolves. Emotional resilience grows as you confront the patterns that once dictated your choices. Relationships transform. You connect not with projections of your beauty, but with individuals who resonate with the depth, authenticity, and complexity you now embrace. Modern life reinforces this clarity. Boundaries are easier to enforce, intimacy becomes intentional, and admiration, when it arrives, is a reflection of respect for your true self, rather than the surface you display. You experience a clarity previously unimaginable, a sense of self that is not contingent on reflection, flattery, or comparison. The lessons of the shadow become lessons of strength. You now navigate life with awareness, patience, and an inner compass that prioritizes depth over display, substance over surface. The path to peace is quiet, steady, and radiant. Imagine a lake at dawn, still and reflective, no wind stirring its surface. You stand at its edge, seeing your own reflection without distortion, without expectation, without judgment. This is how your inner world feels when choice replaces compulsion, awareness replaces fear, and authenticity replaces performance. Connections blossom naturally. Friends, partners, colleagues, they are drawn not to an image, but to presence. Energy once spent on securing admiration is redirected into creation, insight, and meaningful experiences. Life is no longer a storm to survive, but a landscape to explore with calm strength. The allure of external validation fades, replaced by the quiet certainty that your worth is inherent, unshakable, and independent. In this clarity, beauty becomes a tool, not a trap. Attention becomes a mirror, not a measure. You discover that peace is not the absence of chaos, but the mastery of your own response to it. True peace lives within. It needs no applause.